Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. With the humanitarian crisis in Gaza quickly approaching disastrous new levels, Israel has approved an emergency shipment of power generators into the Strip to relieve the pressure. Officials say at least 7 hospitals in Gaza have had to shut down because of the lack of fuel, making this shipment of generators a critical life-saving delivery. The power shortage in Gaza is just one of many decaying infrastructures, and international leaders have just convened to address this mounting crisis, which the United Nations warns is about to verge on a total system collapse, with a special emphasis placed on President Trump's controversial decision to slash nearly half of its funding to the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNRWA. Israel has placed special security restrictions on the generators to ensure that they will not be used for terror. In a separate incident, Israeli security forces have just arrested a 14-year-old Palestinian girl who was visiting Jerusalem without the proper permits. Police told her that they would drop her off near her home in the West Bank, just a few miles north of Israel, but instead they sent her to Gaza, apparently without telling her beforehand. The girl's lawyer says that the girl has never even stepped foot inside the Gaza Strip. Despite its promise to work with Israel to fix its controversial Holocaust bill, the Polish Senate has just voted and approved the legislation in its current form with massive support. It now only needs to be signed by Poland's president to become a law, who has already voiced his support for it. This bill has erupted a wave of outrage from Israel and Jewish organizations all over the world, because as written, it would criminalize anyone who uses the term, quote, Polish death camp to refer to Nazi concentration camps within Poland, including the infamous Auschwitz. Poland says this is merely a necessary means to fight slander against their country, but many experts argue that it dangerously rewrites an incredibly dark chapter in human history and purposely clouds the role many Polish people willingly played in helping execute Hitler's horrific final solution in Poland. Poland's prime minister had previously promised to work with Prime Minister Netanyahu on rewriting the future drafts of this bill, but clearly that has very much not happened. Israeli lawmakers are now considering passing new Israeli laws in response to this Polish legislation. The first would grant immediate legal defense to anyone prosecuted under the incoming law, and the second would assign harsher punishments against Holocaust deniers or the act of those who collaborated with the Nazis during the Holocaust. Despite being internationally recognized as a terrorist organization for years, Hamas leader ISMAIL HANIYEH, along with 3 other Islamic groups active across Egypt and the Palestinian territories, have now been given a special designation as a global terrorist by the United States State Department. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that this new designation is to, quote, target key terrorist groups and leaders, including 2 sponsored and directed by Iran, who are threatening the stability of the Middle East, undermining the peace process, and attacking our allies Egypt and Israel, end quote. Hamas spokesperson Ismail Radwan said HANIYEH will not be affected by this, quote, unfair decision, and that this designation is just the United States strong-arming their political leader. Regardless, Hamas does in fact continue to advocate the destruction of Israel, and this new designation may heavily affect Hamas's role in the Israel-Palestinian peace process going forward. The issues between United States federal and state law regarding cannabis is now crossing the Atlantic, as Israeli cannabis agronomist Shimon Avta has just been deported. Avta was originally sent to the United States on behalf of his employer Tikkun Olam to consult with cannabis-related companies in the states where medical cannabis is legal. Avta moved to Las Vegas and was married last year to an American woman, and all seemed to be going well until early last month when he was picked up by United States immigration authorities for being a trafficker of illicit drugs. According to a Change.org petition filed by Avta's wife, Shimon disclosed exactly what he was doing back in 2015, complete with a letter from his employer when he was issued a 10-year visa. It wasn't until now that he was applying for permanent residency through his marriage that the charges were filed. On January 8th, Avta was given just 2 hours to pack up and leave or face prison time on felony drug trafficking charges. And though Avta did in fact leave, he was detained again just prior to a connection flight to Israel through LA. Avta was then released and is now in Israel, but the fight to bring him back continues. According to specialists in immigration law and the cannabis industries, Avta now appears to be the first and only person caught up in this kind of fight between state and federal law in this way. The biennial Juniper Cobra exercise is back, bringing United States and Israeli military forces together again for a massive simulated attack. During this latest simulation, a huge missile attack on Israel will have to be defended against, in preparation for a possible escalation in the future with Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is the 9th Juniper Cobra drill, and this time several thousand soldiers will again be tapped to defend Israel against an assault of literally thousands of missiles being fired simultaneously and from multiple fronts. This drill also comes at the heels of the annual INSS conference in Tel Aviv, where both Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman and Security Cabinet Minister Naftali Bennett described new approaches to dealing with terrorism, and specifically Iranian proxies like Hezbollah. Bennett outlined his new, quote, octopus doctrine, which aims to attack the head of the octopus and not its arms. Part of this strategy involves looking at Iranian-backed groups like Hezbollah as inextricably linked to their host countries and dealing with it thusly. Lieberman echoed similar policies, saying that, quote, Lebanon's army and Hezbollah are the same, and they will all pay the full price in the event of an escalation, end quote. That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.